This is a 13-inch piece of 2x4 that we are going to make our tinker blocks out of. Since our piece of wood is 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and we want a piece 1 inch thick by 3 inches, we're going to cut this piece down. This is called ripping because we're going to cut with the grain. We're going to rip this piece down by only cutting off about 1/4 inch on one side. Then we'll turn it around and cut 1/4 inch off the other side and end up with nice sharp edges. First we have to set the gate or fence so that we get just the right amount cut off. This can be set very accurately down to 1.25 inches. At that point we lock it in place. We notice that our blade is not high enough to cut through the entire piece. So once we've cut through one direction like this, we will flip this piece over and cut again. Then we'll reset the fence to 1 inch, and we'll cut the other 1/4 inch off of this piece in the same way, once and twice. Here we go. It's always a good idea to not reach over the blade, particularly when it's still moving. Now we're going to cut the other section which didn't get cut. When we set our board on here, we want to make sure that we're not touching the blade. It could very easily kick back and hit us. We're now going to reset the fence to 1 inch and cut again. And there we have our 1 inch piece of stock. But now it's still 3.5 inches wide. Now let's cut this board down just like we did the other. Our blade is much higher than we need. It's always a good idea to keep the blade lower, but enough to cut through the wood. I've reset this to 3 1/4 inches, so we'll take off 1/4 inch from this side, turn it around, and get 1/4 inch off the other side. The other thing I will mention, I'm wearing glasses such that they can be used as safety glasses. If you don't wear glasses or have special glasses that are safe, you need to be sure and put on your safety glasses. So now we have our piece of wood that we're going to work with to make our tinker blocks, and it's now 1 inch thick by 3 inches. To make our tinker blocks out of this piece of wood, we're actually going to have 3 different sizes of block. We're going to have 2 that are only 1 inch wide. We'll have 2 that are 2 inches wide, and we'll have 2 that are 3 inches wide. This gives us something more interesting to work with when we put the pieces together. Any saw blade, for a miter saw or even the table saw we saw earlier, will have some thickness to the blade itself. That means that when we cut our piece of wood, we're going to lose that much wood because of the thickness of the blade cut. Therefore, we can't in advance just measure 1 inch, 1 inch, 2 inches, 2 inches, and so forth, because we will lose that wood every time we cut. There are a couple of different ways to make sure that we get the right size piece. We could actually set up a stop here. When we only have 2 cuts to make for each size, it might not be worth it. If If we were going to cut many pieces, then we definitely would want to do it that way. So what we need to do is measure off exactly 1 inch, cut it, then measure and cut the next one. So I'll start by measuring exactly 1 inch. Now I'm going to take my tri-square, mark a line. The line really helps us to make sure that when we make our cut, we're making it accurately. Always put your material that you're cutting up tight against the fence, and you're going to want to hold it tightly so that it doesn't kick up. The part of the wood that we want to save, in this case, is on the right side. So I want to make sure that the right side of my blade is to the left side of the line. Just aligning it, and that looks really good. Here we go. Let's check and see what we've got here. That looks like exactly 1 inch. And since we should already have 1 inch the other direction and 3 inches this way, we've got our first piece. To create the tinker blocks, I actually started in Onshape and designed the tinker blocks so that I could accurately get a drawing and work from the drawing. When I output the drawing, I selected a 1-to-1 ratio between the actual part and as it would be printed on the paper. This allows me to then use this as a template for cutting the holes. I've created a template here for the 3x3 size hole, and what we do is simply put this down. Now we can actually mark the places for each hole with a punch. These holes will actually be drilled all the way through, so I don't need to mark the other side. But our side holes are not going to go all the way through. They're only going to go down about 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch. Also cut from our plan is something I can use as a template for the side pieces. Now I've got hole markings here on the face, and at least one of the sides. I'll have to do the other sides as well. Our tinker blocks are drilled with a 1/4 inch hole in every case. That's so that we can use a 1/4 inch dowel and fit it into the holes. We're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit, and this drill bit is a 1/4 inch, but it has no marking on it. This is so we can drill all the way through the piece of wood, and we have a piece underneath so that we get a clean edge on the back side of the piece that we are drilling. So here's the piece that we marked earlier, and we can drill this piece all the way through. Notice the back side has very little splintering. To cut the holes in the sides, we're going to use another 1/4 inch drill bit, but it has a piece of tape that allows us to mark how deep we want to go into the board. If you're going to be cutting all the way through and you don't have a support piece underneath, you're going to want to make sure that you align the drill bit with the table, or I should say the table with the drill bit, so that the drill bit never hits the metal. Okay. Oh. Our second to the last step will be to route the edges of our pieces. To do this, we're going to put in a router bit that is made so that the side of the piece can roll on this roller while it cuts a 1/4 inch curve into the wood. Going to adjust this so that the bottom edge of this curve is flush with the plate. When we cut, we want to make sure that the blade is going to be cutting with the blade spinning in the opposite direction that we're going to be pushing the wood. So in this case, our blade is going to be spinning this way, and we're going to push our piece of wood through this way. There we have it. Sometimes we get a little bit of burn mark from when we cut the wood down, and there'll be a few little splinters in some of these holes that we've drilled. So we can smooth that all out using table sands. Well, that's it as far as the construction of these pieces. The only thing we have left to do is cut our dowels. To create our dowel pieces just the right length, we're going to use the bandsaw to cut the pieces to length. I've marked this 1 foot piece of 1/4 inch dowel into 2 4-inch pieces and 2 2-inch pieces. So here we go. Now we have our 4 pieces. This is a scroll saw. A scroll saw has a very thin blade and is used to cut corners or very thin material in very sharp curves. Today, we're going to use the scroll saw just to cut a slit in the end of each of our dowel pieces.